What we're trying to do this next session is really to kind of lay out the agenda for the day. So to look at from our own personal perspectives, where are we coming from? What's, I guess, the history of the activity that we've been up to? What do we think has worked? And then particularly the word collaboration, it keeps coming out today, but how do we collaborate? And how do we collaborate in the sessions today? And clearly going forward using the 2 degrees network to help tackle some of these issues. And I think actually it's really important that I follow Tesco on this stage because a whole load of this activity really ought to be pre-competitive. I think we sometimes look at it in the space of this is confidential information that we shouldn't be sharing. I think that there are ways in which we can share some of this information. So perhaps I encourage my fellow panelists if we can maybe tease that out, as we run through the panel today. We've got a great panel. We've got Jacob, who's the Head of Environment and CSR for Maersk Line. We have Matt, who's Supply Chain Sustainability Leader for GlaxoSmithKline. We've got David, who is a Group Environmental Manager for Robert Wiseman Dairies. And we have Carl, who's a Distribution and Customer Services Director, UK and Ireland, for Unilever. So I think 2 degrees has given us a really good mix there of different types of people. What we thought we would do is we would take no more than 5 minutes each and just give you these personal reflections, and that should leave us a good chunk of time to take some questions from the audience. Since I'm standing up, I'll start, I guess. So I'm Julian Walker-Payne. I'm Head of Sustainability for Asda. And my team sits centrally within the organisation and helps to set strategy and policy. We help to communicate the activities that are underway and help to remove any roadblocks and get support from stakeholders as we need it. And we also interface with Walmart. So those of you that don't know, we're wholly owned by Walmart. Walmart is, I guess, one of the largest companies in the world and certainly the largest retailer. And in sustainability, that's important because our size, I think, brings responsibility as well. And actually, it means that if we move small things, hopefully we can make a big difference because of that scale. But sustainability for us started in 2005. And actually, in 2005, we had 3 pillars, which were to be supplied 100% by renewable energy, to create zero waste, and to sell products that sustain people in the environment. And they still work quite well for us today. They give us the framework that no matter whether you are a company within Walmart in Brazil or a company within Walmart in the UK, you can still move in the same direction. So that framework works well for us. But particularly that third one's key. So to sell products that sustain people in the environment, which is supply chain, which is what we're talking about today. But initially our focus was on ourselves, so was on our operations up until 2010. And we made a lot of progress. We've saved over £80 million. We've actually just analysed our carbon footprint for last year, and this number hasn't been out in the public yet. But in absolute terms, we've reduced it by 17.7%. So these are absolute terms. And we actually bought a new chain of stores last year and incorporated them into our business. And we still reduced by 17.7%. And our energy efficiency is nearly 33% improved than when we started in 2005. We've almost diverted all of our waste from landfill. We've certainly diverted all of our food waste. And we drive 18 million miles less per year. Now, the reason I say that is because we developed our strategy back end of 2009 to 2010 to say, actually, we focus on ourselves quite a lot, almost solely. And that's done 2 things. It's given us a better understanding of where the issues are, given us a better understanding of how to tackle them. How did we get the success, and how can we then share that with those in our supply chain? We also did a piece of activity with Conservation International that said, how much can we make a difference within our operations if we were to gold plate everything? And they said, well, actually, 92% of your impact is in products and services and supply chain. So 2010, we had a new focus, and we have a new sustainability strategy that takes us to the back end of 2015 that is focusing on our supply chain, on our products, and on all the partners that supply those products to us. But the challenge is, how do you engage? How can we get that conversation going? And how much of it can we get from our suppliers into us? How much is it from us into our suppliers? How much thought leadership do we need to provide? So we've identified a number of areas that I'll just quickly take you through. Adaptation is one. So adaptation to climate change rather than mitigation. And we've worked with PricewaterhouseCoopers, and we've looked in detail at 10 countries where we source produce from. And unfortunately, we're still kind of crunching through the data. We'll make as much of it publicly available as we can. But immediately we were looking at how far ahead are these kind of issues that we're going to be talking about today? Are they 2020? Are they 2030? Well, actually, celery is in stress right now. There's just one product that we looked at. It's in stress right now wherever you source it from around the world. So I would say today we should be focusing on what we can start to do now before these issues give us real problems in terms of the products that we want to sell. We've also mapped our global water footprint for our operations and for our major suppliers. And we did a piece of activity called Everyday Experts, which has told us what our customers are thinking. We believe it's the biggest survey that's ever been held in the UK. We had a panel of 6,500 customers, some primary, but some secondary, and some non-Asda shoppers. And we asked them, what do they think about sustainability? And they told us it's right in the forefront of their minds. Actually, they told us green is normal. And they expect us, and actually that translates to suppliers in the room, to help them become greener, because they're not experts, but we have people who are experts. But I guess to finish off, and I'm going to hand on to my colleagues, how do we take that learning? And in particular, a challenge I would throw out here right now, how do we share that with smaller companies that don't have dedicated resources in the way that large companies have, in particular SMEs? How can we say to those SMEs, you've heard this word sustainability, but you don't really know how to engage. So we're going to help you. If you do these 2 things or these 3 things, you'll be moving down that journey, become more efficient and become more sustainable and fitter for the future. So there's my quick 5 minutes. I'm going to hand over to Jacob, if I may, please.
Thanks for that. I'm Jacob Sterling. I'm heading up Environment and CSR in Maersk Line. And for those of you who don't know Maersk Line, it's a shipping company, container shipping company. So basically, our role is that we sit right in the middle of the supply chain between manufacturing and retail, you can say. And in that role, transporting goods all over the world with our 600 container vessels, we do increasingly get a lot of questions, a lot of data requests from our customers on sustainability. Something which we really appreciate because we are quite ambitious on sustainability ourselves. We have a target to reduce our emissions by 25% towards 2020, a target we are going to reach probably much sooner than that. And we really want to also develop this as a benefit to our customers and our commercial relationships. I think what will be interesting for me at least to focus on today is really the links in the supply chain and how to make the links in the supply chain work in a way where you can say you incentivize the supply chain towards better performance. Already with the three first speakers, there's been a lot of talk about collaboration and partnership, which is also something that we would very much value, and it's a discussion that's often brought up when we talk to our customers and our suppliers for that sake. But I think we need to realize that between the links in the supply chain, there's really a commercial relationship. And if we want to incentivize improving sustainability performance, we need to get that into the core of the commercial relationship as well. So you cannot build, I think, a strong partnership, a strong collaboration on improving sustainability performance if you don't have a strong commercial relationship. And we all know, at least I know from my organization, that procurement people, they generally do not like things that cost extra or that limit the choice that they can make when they do procurement choices. So somehow we need to discuss how we can get past that dilemma, but at the same time not being too harsh on the procurement organization or not battling them too hard because we might lose as sustainability people. I think that's really, really critical. And I also think it's absolutely critical for those increasing number of especially retailers that has bold targets on sustainability, that they realize that if they don't manage to do that, to incentivize the supply chains, also within transport, for example, then they are really at risk of not reaching their targets that they have set out, or their CEOs have set out. Specifically, I think that, so how do we do that? I think we would all agree that we need to incentivize the supply chain. Nobody has ever cracked that nut, I think. If we can get a little step closer today, that would be great. I think it's really go through standardized performance metrics and benchmarking. it was mentioned this morning, especially by the gentleman from Coca-Cola, that was taking into their procurement metrics, for example. Before you can do that, of course, you need to know that you're comparing apples to apples. There's a lot of standards out there already, but we still see that there's also a lot of customers that ask for different types of data. Not only is it annoying as a supplier, but it's not really helping either, because if everybody's asking for something slightly different than the others, then things are pulling in different directions, and you're not really giving clear guidance to your supply chain. If we have standardized performance metrics, deep, detailed, specific metrics, and if we have transparency on those, not only transparency between the supplier and the customer, but much broader transparency. I'm talking about full transparency where you, for example, in our case, as we've done for the last 2 years, publicly tell what is the CO2 emissions on a vessel-by-vessel basis for all our vessels. This is the CO2 emissions. This is the CO2 emissions you should expect for this particular trade lane, so on and so forth. If others did the same, it would be very, very easy to benchmark. And you know, it's numbers then. It's real numbers. So you can also, I mean, our customers might even be tempted to make choices based on that, because when it's real numbers based on real data, then it's also a lot easier to get into the procurement spreadsheets of the procurement people, because it needs to be broken down into something that you can trust. I mean, you want to have partnerships on improving, but you don't want to base your procurement decisions on fake data or bad data. So that's, I think, is just my key message, that I think we need to talk about how to incentivize the links between the different parts of the supply chain, and how to standardize performance metrics and improve benchmarking. Thanks.
Thank you, Jacob, and you kept time as well. Appreciate that.
I did.
Yeah. So I'd kind of summarise it as, so we've got a theme around incentives here. We've got a theme around benchmarking and transparency. So it feels like you've started off with those top three. Thank you very much. If I can hand over to Matt now to talk to us. Thanks, Matt.
Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Wilson, Supply Chain Sustainability Leader from GlaxoSmithKline. Just a little bit about GlaxoSmithKline. For those of you who don't know, we're a pharmaceutical company, an FMCG company, and a vaccine company. FMCG, making drinks, nutritional products, emollients, creams, etc., is about 20% of our business, and the balance between vaccines and pharmaceuticals. So we're a very diverse company. We make a lot of our own products, and we also have a lot of contract manufacturing to make some of the products for us that we sell into the marketplace. About 2 years ago, we refreshed our sustainability strategy. We had something up until that point called a Plan for Excellence, which focused on just our own operations, our direct operations. And we took a step back and we looked at all the evidence around climate change, what was happening, what's important to our stakeholders, society, etc. And we took a view around what impact our products were driving. And when you take that step back and you look, you can't help but see actually you're more than just your operations. Your products drive an environmental impact all across the supply chain. So, and I say more than the supply chain, the value chain. So when a consumer uses your product, when a consumer disposes of the waste from that product. So we set our new strategy around our entire value chain, and we began to understand what were the pillars, what are the key things that we wanted to build that strategy around, and we focused on carbon, water and environmental stewardship, very similar to what you've heard before. And we've set ourselves some pretty stretching targets. We want to be at top level carbon neutral by the time we get to 2050. Don't know how we're going to do it, but we need to set ourselves on that journey. So for 2015, we've set a target of a 10% carbon footprint reduction, and 2020 a 25% carbon footprint reduction. And these are absolute reductions. I'll focus on carbon specifically to start off with, but to support this, we've looked at our overall value chain carbon footprint, and we think GSK is somewhere around 15.5 million tonnes CO2 equivalent across our entire value chain. And the big surprise for us was that only 2 million tonnes of that was driven from our direct operations. The rest of that is across the value chain. About 5 million tonnes comes from the use of our inhaled devices, which use a propellant HFA-134a, and the balance is predominantly in packaging, supply chain, and a little bit in transport, and 1 million tonnes in use phase. So the big surprise for us was around the impact of our propellants, which is significant. It's about a third of our footprint, and the impact of our supply chain, which drives about a third of our footprint. So clearly, if we're going to be successful, we have to engage the supply chain effectively. We also set another pillar around water, and we've set our direct operations use about 18 billion litres of water globally, and we've set an absolute reduction target of 20% by 2015, and then we've also set a value chain reduction target of 20% by 2020. And we've just completed our global water footprint, and we think that's about 18,000 billion litres of water for our business, so huge. And we're just pulling a strategy together what we're going to do with that. And then we've set some targets around environmental stewardship, and that ranges from responsible sourcing of materials to how we deal with waste. And there's some pretty big numbers in there, and we've had to break that down to help the business understand that. And we've done that through footprinting our top 20 products. And what we found is our top 20 products drive about 80% of our global footprint. And surprisingly, the number one product footprint was Ventolin, which I've mentioned, and that's around the propellant. So we've looked at a strategy, what can we do around that? So we're looking at, can we reduce the amount of propellant we use? Can we shrink the device? Can we invest in different types of propellant? And ultimately, can we change the devices? So going forward, none of our new respiratory devices will be launched in a metered dose inhaler. They'll all be dry powder inhalers, and they carry about 1/29th the environmental burden of a metered dose inhaler. So we've got some great progress there. The second biggest product by impact actually was Horlicks, so not a pharmaceutical, not a vaccine, but Horlicks in India, and that's just under 1 million tonnes of CO2, predominantly driven by the coal that's burned in our factories. And we have an ambitious plan to replace that with locally sourced biomass, and that's about 130,000 tonnes of CO2. And about 500,000 tonnes of CO2 driven from the milk supply chain. We have about 25,000 milk suppliers in India that support our business there. So we're looking at what we can do, very similar to what's happened across Europe and the US in improving farm efficiency, looking at feed, looking at utilising manure, etc., etc. So far, versus our target, we've identified about 1.7 million tonnes of CO2 reduction to get us to 2015. But our business is not static, it's dynamic. Some products are growing, some products are shrinking. So the challenge going forward is how do we bring our suppliers with us in this journey? So how do we get that transparency? We've done a lot to say, this is our operation, this is what our impact is, and this is the part that you're driving and you can help us with. But we really haven't stepped outside of our own four walls yet into that supply chain. We've had some conversations, obviously, with our top manufacturers to support those product footprints, and they've been great, and they've helped identify the hotspots. But now we need to move from the discussion into the delivery, and I think that's going to be the real challenge going forward.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate that. It's interesting because we were talking previously about incentives and benchmarking and transparency. We're now starting to flesh out the other areas that we need to look at. So how do we involve other people? So I guess that links in with the transparency, and that helps us then. Where do we focus these efforts? And actually the in-use phase came out then as well. So similar to what I was discussing on behalf of ASDA, where are consumers and how do we involve consumers, I guess, as part of this also. And you mentioned stewardship and the energy mix. So again, something I think we could possibly collaborate on to all help each other moving forward on that. I'm going to hand over to David now to give us some words from him. Thank you.
I'll stand.
Please, yeah, by all means.
Good morning, everyone. My name's David Douglas. I'm the Group Environmental Manager from Robert Wiseman Dairies. We're confident we've got the information where we can start to generate a clear and a very transparent strategy on how we're going to deal with our suppliers. We want to be able to measure properly that impact, and we want to be able to set realistic, clear, transparent targets going forward. Looking at the other way in our supply chain, up to our customers, Tesco, Marks and Spencer, Sainsbury's, there's good forums where we do work with them. I would actually like to see more of that. I'd like to see more engagement with our customers at that sustainability and that environmental level. We engage a lot with them, obviously in technical backgrounds, but I would like to see more on that sustainability level about what we're doing. I'd like them to see them challenge us more, actually, on what we are doing. I think that we are one of the most efficient dairy companies, liquid fresh milk companies. I think when we look at what consumers want, they want a product which is a low environmental impact. Whether there's a carbon score on there, a water score, or any other type of environmental score on there, is, for me, it's what's more important is they trust your brand. And they know that if I go and buy Robert Wiseman Dairy's milk, I know that they've done everything possible to reduce their environmental impact. And for me, that's what I want to try and get over. That's what we're striving to do. Trying to be the most efficient, the most sustainable dairy company. I think that's pretty much me. My time.
Perfect, yeah. Thank you. You were spot on. I think you brought out there the fact that sustainability generally is probably not a well-resourced activity within companies. So I alluded earlier to SMEs not having anybody. Actually, it doesn't mean that big companies have hundreds of people either. And how can we get more industry engagement? So, that might be the one thing that comes out, from today. How can we form some more of these groups and get some more of that collaboration? And you're also talking about carbon, and a few of us have said it so far today, seems to be a common metric. So maybe carbon is a good place to start those conversations. It clearly covers a lot of impact areas. But also, I love the way you finished saying it enhances brand trust. That's something to keep focusing on why we're doing this. We're doing it because it is actually core to our businesses as well. Carl, if I can ask you to give your perspective, please.
So I work for Unilever. I've worked for Unilever for 16 years. And Unilever, hopefully a lot of you have heard of, but we're a global business, a big FMCG business. And if any of you open your kitchen cupboards or your bathroom cupboards, you'll find some of our brands there. Sustainability has always been core to the various dimensions of sustainability have been core to Unilever right back since Lord Leverhulme looked after his employees up at Port Sunlight. And his strategy was about bringing hygiene to the masses at an affordable level, and that has evolved many times. And over the various supply chain roles that I've done over the past 16 years, I've seen great steps forward, whether that's in manufacturing, reducing waste, or water, or energy. But actually, one of the main reasons why I'm still working for Unilever and intend to continue working for Unilever is the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, which was launched a couple of years ago. Just over 18 months ago, we launched our new strategy, publicly stated to the markets, where Paul Pullman, our CEO, said we will double our business, and not time bound, but notionally, we want to do it in the next decade or so. And while we're doing that, we will reduce our environmental footprint. And actually, doubling the size of the business was a scary part of the strategy, but we're making good progress there. Doing it without increasing our environmental footprint is the scarier bit of that strategy. And Stephen mentioned earlier, it's okay to not have all the answers. I'm glad, because we don't have all the answers on how we're going to do that yet. There are three main pillars in the Sustainable Living Plan. It's about health and well-being improvement for 1 billion consumers globally. And we are a global business, and our brands touch the lives of billions of consumers globally. So that gives us a potential to do that, but also the responsibility that we have to step up to that challenge. Because if Unilever can't do that, then there's not many other companies who will be able to do that. And in the UK, there's activities like Flora Proactive's brand, or reducing salt in Flora and some of our Knorr products. There's activities we're undertaking with the government. There's hand washing campaigns under Radox, etc. The second pillar is about moving to 100% sustainably sourced products. And we've got various initiatives under that. Palm oil, a very contentious ingredient in a lot of our products, in soaps, etc. And we were founder member of the Sustainable Palm Oil Roundtable for Sustainable Palm Oil. And we're actually exceeding our milestones there. This year we have 100% of our palm oil from sustainable sources, 3 years ahead of plan. We want to move to 100% from traceable sources, so we know exactly where it's come from. And we'll do that over the coming years. And we want to move to, by 2020, having 100% of our products sourced sustainably. And then reducing the environmental footprint of our products is probably the biggest challenge within this. And we did extensive analysis over about a 2-year period, about 1,600 of our products, the full end-to-end life cycle. And actually it threw up some surprises. Traditionally, and certainly the consumer's perception is that the factories and the trucks on the road are the biggest impact on that. And actually it's not. That's 5% of our greenhouse gas emissions. About a quarter of it is in sourcing. And hence we've been doing a lot of work with our supplier base globally, regionally and locally. Tea is a good example. We buy 12% of the world's black tea. And we've been working with the Rainforest Alliance to improve the sustainability around the tea sourcing there. And that's where I think we need to then leverage the collaboration with our retailers, with the Asda's, Tesco's and the other retailers that we sell through, because if we can do some great things through our advertising, our promotional activities, our brand messages to try and change consumer behaviour. But we'll have a better chance to do that if we are working together with retailers to try through the innovation, activation in store, educate consumers about, okay, if it's laundry, lower temperatures, shorter cycles. If it's in the shower, dry shampoos on the market, conditioners that you don't need to rinse off on the market. But showering is a bit of a pleasurable thing, and getting people to take shorter showers is not easy to do. So there's a big education job to do, and we'll make better progress in that area if we work together as an industry. And then that 5%, but actually the bit that certainly over the past few years since I've been looking after our distribution network is close to the heart is in that environmental footprint of the manufacturing and the trucks and sheds. And over the past, even before the Unilever launched the Sustainable Living Plan, we were double-digit reduction in our waste and water and energy usage in the manufacturing area, and actually all of our Unilever UK and Ireland factories and warehouses are zero landfill since last year. But we then moved that into, well, what do we need to do differently into the future in order to reduce the number of trucks on the road? And we've got some good examples working with Tesco. We've actually recycled one of their old scissor lifts and installed that at one of our warehouses so that their big double-deck trailers can call in and collect loads on the way back from doing a store delivery. We've got some projects underway with lots of the other retailers, and as they're very active with us there as well. I think the bit that we challenge, the bit that we come up against is always, what is more important? Is it carbon, where we all talk a good game, or is it actually the cost? And I think we're still probably at the stage where unless there's a cost saving out of it, we're not going to do it. And I think that's something that we may need to get over. Because the consumer isn't going to give us the space over the coming years to still be lining our own pockets, whether it's as a manufacturer or as a retailer.
Thanks very much, Carl. Interesting, you were the only one of us to mention how it motivates staff. So I think that's quite interesting, how people internally can get fired up by this as well.
Just an example of that, actually, because the employee engagement for us is key. And that Unilever Sustainable Living Plan has been a great vehicle for the employee engagement, and actually getting every single member of staff working for Unilever, whether they're on a packing line in a factory or a brand manager or where they're working. But what can they do differently? How can they change what our brands do and how we bring those brands to market? And it'll be small incremental steps. But we ran a reward program recently where people who had made the biggest contributions won a prize, and those 2 employees went off to Kenya just to see our tea plantations and what we've been doing there about sustainable sourcing. And one of the girls who went came back and talked about the villages that the tea plantation workers live in, which Unilever has set up and provided healthcare and the schools, etc. there. And she went into one of the schools and she said she found herself very emotional because for her this was what the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan was for. It was for that generation and their kids.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really motivating. You also mentioned, carbon versus cost, and I think that's another elephant in the room from today. I've clearly got loads of questions I'd like to ask these guys myself, but I'm going to open it up to you guys because we don't have a huge amount of time for questions. So we've got a roving mic, same as before, if you want to stick your arm out. If you can also say whether it's to the panel or whether it's to a particular individual, and please introduce yourself when you ask a question. We've got one over there.
Question for the panel. It's Nick Painter, British Gas and the Energy Performance Team. In late last year, we carried out a survey through the MEUC, Major Energy Usage Council workshops on energy reduction and the barriers to that and CO2 reduction. And the reality of it was, the main point that came out was it's financing those energy reductions that were key to that. Bearing in mind what you were just saying, Carl, about we're not going to do it unless it sort of creates some value, actually pays back. How do you see the future in terms of funding that? Would you be prepared to fund your SME or supply chain to assist them to reduce energy? Or do you think there's anything you could assist them with in helping them, enabling them to achieve CO2 reduction, which is your ultimate objective?
If I go with that one first, I mean, at the end of the day, we are a business, and we do need to make sure that we are, growing sustainably and profitably. So there's not going to be any blank checks for any of our supplier base. Much like Coke, we run Partner to Win annual sessions with our global biggest suppliers. There is a huge prize for these suppliers if they can bring solutions to the table that will help us on our environmental journey, which is we are going to double our business. And we're demonstrating that we are going to double our business. So for those suppliers, if they can do what we need them to do with respect to reducing the total environmental footprint of the components and the materials that they supply, let's double their revenue over the coming decade or so. So there is a big prize. At the same, and how financially that is woven into justification and business cases, etc., is looked at differently from one company to the other. I think there is a requirement for ring fencing capital. I think that was something Steve mentioned earlier also in Coke. And yes, we have ring-fenced an element of our total capital budget specifically for activities in the sustainable area. And some examples that we've used that for is combined heat and power at some of our factories. And the reason for ring-fencing it is generally we could get a better return on that investment if we did something else with it. But we need to be doing these activities if we're going to deliver that environmental aspect of our strategy.
Matt, you mentioned electricity as well. Do you have any views on that?
Yeah, just much the same as Carl. We have a ring-fenced revenue and capital budget, actually, about £8 million a year across the global business to de-risk projects, renewable energy projects, energy-saving projects, to really get over the hurdle of how difficult will this be to implement before we spend any capital on it. And we've had quite good success. So annually, I think for the last 5 years, in absolute terms, our direct energy consumption has come down by 7% annually, and that's through investing in CHP, solar, wind, even to replacing steam traps with alternate steam traps. So there's definitely money to be saved by investing in energy reduction.
I might throw it open for another question, just to see if we can get as many in as we can. Otherwise, we can come back to that one.
Hi, my name is Charles Allison from ERM, Sustainability Consultancy. I've got a question for the panel. In our work with supplier sectors, we find that many of them are very hesitant to give away company by company or factory by factory data to their customers. And instead they prefer to, or many of them are working on developing sector averages. So for plastic bottles or metal cans, or even for chemical ingredients that go into paints or consumer products. So I suppose my question is to the customers on the panel, are you happy getting sector average data? Or would you much prefer getting supplier by supplier data? And maybe a question for Jacob from Maersk as well. What's your view on that?
I can give an example from our industry where for the last almost a decade now we've been working on developing metrics to measure environmental performance of ships. It's called the Clean Cargo Working Group. It's part of a Business for Social Responsibility. 60% of all the container ships in the world is part of that group. And we are there now at a quite mature stage where everybody is submitting data to that group, which does not only give a global industry average, it also gives trade lane specific industry averages. And to the members of the group, it also gives company specific trade lane averages, so that, for example, if a company is moving goods from China to the UK, they can go in and say what's the average, and and where does my supplier score on that scale? Are they above or below the average? So if I have these two suppliers, how do they score against each other? And that's really what I was trying to get at in my little presentation before. That when you get to that level, then it's actually useful. And I think that, of course, it tells you something about the supplier's efficiency, but it doesn't really give away any secrets because it's an output measure. It doesn't tell the customer and the other suppliers whether it's because you have some really, really advanced technologies in your ships, whether you are sailing backwards or whatever you do. It doesn't say that. It's just an output measure. What is the CO2 resulting from this shipment? And all the carriers have agreed to that metric. And I think that it would be absolutely great if we could see more of that, and not only sharing between the supplier and the customer, but also across. So that we, for example, I mean, we don't have visibility to the individual performance of our competitors, which we would, of course, very much like. Sometimes we have a feeling that well, some of them are, of course, scoring better than us on specific trades. But we would like to know why. First, we might be able to improve, which would be great. Might be able to learn from them. But also, we could be able to sometimes scrutinize the data if it doesn't look right. If we are going there with a very big and new ship, and we know it's very energy efficient, and they're trading with a very small and old ship, something is wrong with the data, and we can go back and say, hey, this doesn't look right. You need to recheck these data. So that's back to my point about let's have some standardized measures that doesn't give away secrets, but still give that level of granularity so you can trust it in decision making, and also have transparency across so that we can compare supplier to customer, but also peer to peer.
Davey, I might give you the last word on this, if I may. You're asking for more engagement, across the industry.
Yeah, I think the information flow between suppliers and customers has got a long way to go, and that level of trust, as Andrews from Tesco pointed out earlier on, the information given to the sustainability team is kept there. The buyers won't use that, but the commercial team have that reluctance to supply that information. And how you do that, like Jacob said, it's getting that right level of granularity that you can use it in the supply chain, but doesn't give away confidential information is going to be really difficult. And I think that's where there needs to be more work done between the suppliers and the customers, and what information exactly is useful to them, what will show them where your supplier is making that difference, making that contribution to your targets, because that's like Tesco's 30% target, and M&S, they've all got targets in reducing the impact of the supply chain, and it's how we fit into that without giving away that confidential information and keeping the commercial team happy and not giving them nightmares.
Yes. Thank you for that. We're keeping you from your coffee, so I think we'll draw an end to it there. Obviously, the whole panel will be around, so if you want to ask us questions individually, please do so. But please, can you thank the panel?